he sued to save jobs at the Portsmouth gaseous diffusion plant down in Portsmouth, Ohio. We also have many lawsuits right now that are under development. And I think that, and we've had a lot of communication with school boards in particular about what the rationale is for masking. And frankly, the parents that have contacted me are very concerned that there may be a coming vaccine mandate for children. And it seems like, we kind of know right now, basically, that masks fundamentally don't work unless they're used in a very specific way. I've got 60 studies. If anybody was interested, I'm happy to give those to you. If you have an N95 mask properly put on, you don't touch your face, oh, that mask might work. It's equivalent, though, to good air handling equipment. This is a beautiful building. If the room air is changed 4 times, that's equivalent to an N95 mask. So there's lots of ways to deal with viral load in a room. And the masks that the kids are using, and I see some of the adults using, absolutely fail in terms of protecting against disease. The other problem with it, though, like I stated, is that we're dealing with constitutional issues. We're dealing with parental rights. We have constitutional issues under the Ohio Constitution, Section 1, Article 1. And there's a case that your attorneys know, it's called Steele versus Hamilton County, and it says that we have a right to decide about what medical procedures, medical equipment are imposed upon us. And in this case, it's the parents that have the right to decide what happens to their children in terms of medical procedures. With masks, and with particularly a concern for many people is perhaps a coming vaccine mandate. We know that these masks don't work. These kids don't, I've got kids, they don't wear masks properly. They're not gonna wear them properly. They're gonna touch their face. They're gonna do all kinds of things. We also know that vaccines are completely unnecessary for children. We also know now that vaccines simply do not work in general for children. The breakthrough rate now for vaccinated versus unvaccinated, we've got about 39% of the vaccinated getting sick with the Delta virus, and then maybe coming up now, we'll see with the Omicron virus. But the vaccines are not working. And in fact, something very strange has happened. Last year, we knew we were hit with a pandemic. We knew we were going to have a high death rate, and we were about 10% above what would have been expected as normal death rate last year. And that was equivalent, though, to the death rate in 2000. So it had been going down, it notched up to about 2000. This year, our death rate, if you look at the death rate for the United States, we are now up 20%. What possibly can explain that kind of increase in the death rate when we have spread vaccines throughout this country? We've got 150 million people who've had COVID, so they have natural immunity, and we've got another 130 million, 40 million that have been vaccinated. What is going on here? We've got to ask questions. We've got to look at the overall picture. But moving on, and specifically for schools, what we've looked at, yes?
Your 3 minutes. I don't know if Mr. Desser, did you want to wait for him and speak? We got the 30-minute time limit. Would you like to step up and speak, and then he can come back if you'd like?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay.
I don't want to stop anybody from speaking back there. But schools have, you guys, I know you're trying to do the responsible thing, but somehow we've lost the facts in the arguments here. Masks don't work, vaccines don't work, and apparently facts are no longer working. These facts, and I'm sure you've been buried in information from your parents, and from the kids maybe, about these facts. It's pretty well established and it's pretty logical as to what's happening here. But I want to go more to something that I think, I don't think you're aware of. Because I've seen what the attorneys have advised the schools. And I think they're telling you that you don't have a liability and you can go ahead and do this stuff without liability. I don't think that's true. We have in Ohio a criminal statute. It's 2905-12. It's called coercion. And the reason I'm bringing up a criminal statute, and I'm a civil attorney, I'm not a criminal attorney. The reason I'm bringing up a criminal statute is you can be civilly liable under a criminal statute in the civil courts through a civil lawsuit. This has been tested and it's been upheld in the courts. And let me tell you what 2905-12 says. If you threaten an official act over which a person has freedom of choice, which people have freedom of choice, parents have freedom of choice about the medical decisions that are made about their children. So if you threaten an official act over which a person has legal freedom of choice, you can be held liable. That's called coercion. You have to respect that freedom of choice. And where does it come from? It comes from Section 1, Article 1 of our Ohio Constitution, and it comes from our First Amendment. None of the letters that I've received from law firms around the state has mentioned the coercion issue. We are litigating it right now. We will continue to litigate that issue. You guys have general authority to take care of these kids. And these parents want you to take care of their kids. They want you to be responsible. And I know that you're trying to be. I get it. But it has to be reasonable. It has to be fact-driven. You have to know and respond when we know we've got 60 studies that masks don't work. We have to be reasonable when we know that the vaccines don't work. We have to be reasonable when we know that kids simply, generally, don't have a problem with this illness. Do you guys know how many children, does anyone know how many children have died? And every child is a loss. I get it. Every single year in this country, 50,000 kids die for various reasons. Every one of those is a tragedy for those parents. I know that. You know how many died from COVID? About 300. You know how many died in Ohio from COVID? 19. Almost every last one of them, unfortunately, was overweight or had some kind of pre-existing condition. And we're telling kids to stay home and get on their computers. That doesn't make any sense. So the risk to children is minimal. If you believe in the vaccines, of course, and you're a teacher, you don't want the exposure, which we actually already know that kids don't really transmit the disease. But if you're a teacher and you're worried about it, and you believe this rhetoric that's going on, take the vaccine. It either works or it doesn't. I personally think it's failing. But if you're scared about it, take the vaccine. Because we know that adults are more vulnerable. But we need to take steps as adults as well to take care of ourselves, take care of our health, and make sure we're resistant to any of these bugs that are out here. And I don't think the vaccine is doing it. Remember, our mortality rate in the United States is up 20%, beyond where it should be. So you have the general authority. You've got to be reasonable. But there's a public policy consideration comes into play. The state legislature this past summer limited the Department of Health's authority. You know this. I've seen it in the letters from your lawyers. Someone has to be diagnosed with an illness to be quarantined, or in direct contact with someone who's been diagnosed with an illness to be quarantined. What I've seen is kids are being quarantined because somebody in the room was diagnosed with COVID. And I've defended a young woman who got charged criminally when she brought her son to school in violation of a quarantine, which the school didn't have any authority to instigate. And you know what I did for defense for her? I asked for where's the health department order. They're the only ones that can order a quarantine. The state legislature made that clear. They order the quarantine. There was no order. The case was thrown out. But that's how far we've gone. We're going off the rails, folks. We're gonna, school board charge somebody criminally. Come on. The judge threw that out like that. Thank God. To violate or to impinge on somebody's fundamental constitutional rights under the Ohio Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, you guys have got to identify an imminent harm. There is no imminent harm with COVID-19 with these kids. And beyond that, if there even were imminent harm, if that's what you believe, you have to have a very compelling interest. You have to have a compelling interest and a way to address it reasonably. The masks don't do that. The shots don't do that. The quarantining, the way that it's being instituted, doesn't do that. If somebody needs quarantine, what I would recommend for school boards to do is call the Department of Health, make sure you've got a diagnosis of illness for that person, and if there's been direct contact between that person and another person, you can tell them to go home. Beyond that, I think you're violating your parents' and the children's constitutional rights. I can go on and on. I've got a lot of facts. You know, if you wanna have some facts on the masks, I've got it. Masks themselves have microfiber insulation problems, CO2 filtering problems. They might be good if somebody's sick in reducing the spray if they're coughing or sneezing, but if someone's sick, that's within your power. Go home. Not for quarantine, just go home, you're sick. It's the normal, natural reaction. That's what we should be doing. We can't get control of this virus partly because it lives in animals. It lives in our dogs, our cats, our deers. I read some ridiculous story that the Akron Zoo is vaccinating the animals over there. Then we're never gonna catch up with this thing. It's endemic, it's gonna stay with us, it's gonna be like the flu and the colds that we've had, and we better figure it out. I really think you guys have a wonderful place here. I know that you've been inundated with facts. If anyone here wanted to have information on studies, we've got them. Dr. Peter McCullough is one of our experts who signed on an affidavit. It's a wonderful affidavit. I'd be happy to provide it to the board. We have industrial hygienists as well that are telling us about the air handling equipment. If you want an industrial hygienist to check out the building and work on the air handling equipment, at this point, I think they would do it for free. We have very dedicated experts and people who want this insanity to stop, and they're willing to help. Peter McCullough worked with us for free on the Miami University case. This is a renowned expert, and he came in for free. So those resources are available to you. If you want to use them, I will help make the connections, and we can get some rationality back in terms of what's going on here. And the one last thing I would say, and I think many people realize this, the Ohio Department of Health, and even the CDC and NIH, they're issuing all these recommendations. These are not orders. They're just recommendations, and they're out of date. Talk to doctors who are dealing with this every day. Talk to nurses who are dealing with this every day. We represent nurses at Ohio Health, Cleveland Clinic, university hospitals, and the Ohio State Medical Center right now. We have 30,000 nurses that are asking for exemptions from the vaccine mandate. Some of those institutions now have backed down. Why do you think 30,000, and doctors, there's doctors in that group too, not quite as many, but there's a lot of nurses, respiratory therapists, doctors. Why do you think these medical people are resisting this mandate and this vaccine? I'm gonna tell you what I have learned, and it's terrible. They know what the vaccines are truly doing. They're seeing people injured by the vaccine. They're seeing the breakthrough infections. They don't trust it. It's 30,000 people. I think we need to, and they're putting their jobs on the line by taking that position, on top of it all. That tells me they're sincere. That tells me they know what they're talking about. I'm gonna give you just a couple of quick more examples. We have had an incredible spike in miscarriages at Akron SUMA this year. I've got visiting nurses that are being told to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, because they don't want the information getting out there. At the Cleveland Clinic, in the heart lab, they are finding people who come in that don't appear to be candidates for heart problems, and yet they have heart problems. It has doubled in the last year. I had a 20-year nurse call me and say, I've never seen people coming into our lab like this age, this weight. They didn't have any diabetes, they weren't overweight, they were younger. So we're having miscarriages, we're having heart problems. And there was a recent study out, the Gundy study, just came out the last couple of weeks about what the spike protein is doing to the endothelial cells. Pay attention to that, because it's damaging. We do not want this to hit our kids. The third aspect was really scary. We have all had people in our family undergo chemotherapy, radiation treatment for their cancers. I have heard from the cancer nurses now. And remember, I've got a pool of 30,000 nurses and healthcare workers. They are telling me that the normal progression of treatment for cancer stops after the shot is given. So I'm absolutely horrified by what we're doing. It's an atrocity. I have a very strong position on a very strong sense of what's happening. I think it's an atrocity. But the other thing that's happening that I can do something about, I can't do anything about medical. I can do something about saving and preserving our freedom, our religious freedom, and our rights under the Ohio Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. So that's what I'm doing. We've got a small firm, but we're all over Ohio on this, and we continue to litigate this to the end. I appreciate your time tonight, and I appreciate you guys giving up your time to listen. Thank you.